It was a cold, quiet evening in the maternity ward, where soft cries of newborns echoed like whispers of life. Nurse Claire moved swiftly, her steps as light as her touch, her years of experience allowing her to bring calm to the most anxious moments. She was known for her compassion, for the way her gentle presence could soothe even the most frightened mother. Tonight, however, her heart felt unusually heavy. In room 212, a young mother named Sarah lay in her hospital bed, her face pale and her eyes rimmed red from hours of tears. Next to her, a tiny bundle wrapped in a pink blanket lay in a crib, her breaths soft and steady. But Sarah's gaze kept drifting to the other crib, the one that should have held the baby's twin. Instead, it stood empty, a silent reminder of the loss that had shaken her world only hours earlier. The twins, born prematurely at 31 weeks, had fought valiantly. The first baby, now peacefully sleeping, had defied the odds. But her sister, Nurse Claire, had been there when the monitors flatlined, when the room filled with an eerie quiet that no parent should ever have to endure. Sarah's sobs still echoed in her mind. As Claire checked on the healthy twin, she couldn't help but notice the subtle differences in Sarah tonight. The young mother had been unusually quiet since the news of her loss. Her normally hopeful eyes seemed distant, and her hands lay limply by her sides, as if drained of purpose. Claire wanted to say something, anything, to bring a spark of light to Sarah's overwhelming darkness. But what could words possibly do? She stepped out of the room to grab a chart, her mind racing. That's when she overheard the attending physician discussing the case with another nurse. "It's a tragedy," the doctor said, shaking his head. But there was nothing more we could do for the twin. The lack of oxygen was just too severe. The words struck Claire deeply. She had witnessed countless miracles in her career, but she also seen heartbreak that defied explanation. Something about this situation, though, tugged at her in a way she couldn't shake. Returning to room 212, Claire felt an unshakable pull toward the empty crib. She glanced at the healthy twin, then back to the mother, who was staring blankly at the ceiling. An idea began to form in her mind, not logical, perhaps not even medically sound, but born out of the sheer desperation to offer comfort to a grieving mother and a broken family. With careful hands, Claire placed the healthy twin next to the lifeless one. The sight was almost too much to bear, the vibrant pink blanket against the pale, still form of the other baby. But Claire whispered softly, as if addressing both of them, "You were meant to be together. Let's give you this moment." The room was silent except for the soft hum of machines. Claire watched, her breath caught in her throat, as Sarah turned her head slightly toward the crib. Her face seemed to soften, a flicker of life returning to her eyes as she reached out, her fingers trembling. And then it happened. At first, Claire thought she was imagining it. A tiny movement, so subtle it could have been a trick of the light. She leaned closer, her heart pounding. The lifeless twin, cold and still just moments ago, suddenly seemed to shudder, a small gasp escaping her lips. It was so faint, so fragile, that Claire froze, unsure if it was real. Sarah's gasp broke the stillness, her tears streaming as she clutched at the side of the crib. "What's happening?" she cried, her voice a mixture of fear and hope. Claire didn't have the answers. All she knew was that in this moment, against all logic and reason, the impossible seemed to be unfolding before their eyes. Claire's pulse raced as she crouched down beside the crib, her eyes locked on the tiny infant. The room seemed frozen in time, every sound muffled except for the faintest whisper of breath that now came from the baby who had moments ago shown no signs of life. Claire's training screamed at her to act, to verify what she was seeing, but her heart told her to pause, to let this fragile moment unfold as it was meant to. Sarah's trembling fingers reached out, brushing against the still cool skin of the lifeless twin. "She moved," Sarah whispered, her voice cracking. Her eyes searched Claire's face, desperate for confirmation. I think she did," Claire replied, her own voice unsteady. She placed 2 careful fingers on the baby's tiny chest, her years of experience guiding her. There it was, a flutter, faint but undeniable. A heartbeat. Claire's breath caught in her throat as she looked back at Sarah, who was now weeping uncontrollably. "She's alive," Claire said softly, barely able to believe her own words. "Sarah, she's alive." But how? The question loomed over them like a shadow, unspoken but heavy. Claire knew the baby had been declared dead just hours ago. The doctors had tried everything: oxygen, chest compressions, medications. But there had been no response. The baby's tiny body had been left in the neonatal unit, awaiting final arrangements. Yet here she was, her chest rising and falling ever so slightly, her lips quivering with the faintest cry. It didn't make sense. Sarah pulled both babies closer, cradling them with a fierce protectiveness. "I never stopped praying," she whispered through her tears. "I begged God not to take her. I begged him to bring her back." Claire's mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of what she knew. The twin had been premature, her lungs underdeveloped, her body fragile. But premature babies didn't just start breathing again after being declared dead. This wasn't science, this was something else entirely. The mystery deepened as Claire recalled the moments leading up to this. The healthy twin had been restless all evening, crying more than usual and refusing to settle down. Claire had thought she was hungry or uncomfortable, but now she wondered if it had been something more. Could the bond between the twins, their connection, have played a role? She had read about cases where one twin's presence or heartbeat could stabilize the other, but this was beyond anything she had ever encountered. The room began to fill with a quiet hum of activity as other nurses and doctors were called in. Dr. Patel, the attending physician, arrived within minutes, his face a mixture of confusion and disbelief as Claire explained what had happened. He examined the baby carefully, his brow furrowed in concentration. This isn't possible," he muttered, shaking his head. Her vitals were non-existent. There was no pulse, no brain activity. I didn't understand. "Neither do I," Claire admitted. "But she's alive, Dr. Patel. She's alive." The doctor stepped back, his hands on his hips as he stared at the tiny form before him. "We need to run tests immediately. There has to be an explanation." As the medical team began their work, Sarah held tightly to her babies, refusing to let go. Her tears had slowed, but her expression remained a mixture of awe and fear. "Please," she whispered to Claire, her voice trembling. "Don't let them take her away from me again." Claire placed a reassuring hand on Sarah's shoulder. "They're not taking her, Sarah. They're just making sure she's okay. She's a fighter, just like you." While the medical staff moved around them, running tests and monitoring the baby's vitals, Claire stayed by Sarah's side, offering quiet words of comfort. She could see the exhaustion in Sarah's face, the toll of the past 24 hours etched into every line. This was a mother who had already endured unimaginable loss, and now she was being thrust into a whirlwind of uncertainty. As the hours passed, the tests revealed more questions than answers. The baby's heart rate was weak but steady. Her oxygen levels were low but improving. There were no signs of brain damage or other complications, despite the time she had spent without a detectable pulse. It was as if she had been suspended in a state between life and death, waiting for the right moment to return. But when now? And how? Word of the miracle began to spread through the hospital, drawing curious staff and whispers of disbelief. Some called it a medical anomaly, others a divine intervention. Claire didn't know what to believe, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she had witnessed something extraordinary, something that defied explanation. In the quiet moments, Claire found herself drawn to the healthy twin. The baby had calmed considerably since being placed next to her sister, her cries replaced by soft coos and gentle movements. It was as if she had known all along that her sister wasn't truly gone, as if her presence had called her back. Claire had always believed in the power of human connection. But this was something deeper, a bond that transcended logic and reason. Meanwhile, Sarah clung to her babies, her hope rekindled, but her fear still lingering. What if she doesn't make it? She whispered to Claire one evening, her voice barely audible. What if this is just temporary? Claire knelt beside her, meeting her tearful eyes. "I don't have all the answers, Sarah," she admitted. "But I do know that your baby has already done the impossible. She's here. She's fighting. And we're going to do everything we can to make sure she stays with you." The days that followed were a blur of tests, treatments, and sleepless nights. But through it all, the baby continued to grow stronger. Her cries became louder, her movements more deliberate. Sarah began to smile again, her laughter soft but genuine, as she watched her daughters interact in ways only twins could. Yet, beneath the joy, a question lingered. What had brought the baby back? Was it the bond with her sister, the power of a mother's love, or something beyond human comprehension? Claire couldn't shake the feeling that there was a story here, one that needed to be told, not just for Sarah and her family, but for everyone who had ever doubted the strength of the human spirit. As the hospital staff marveled at the baby's recovery, Claire found herself drawn to the twins' room more often than her rounds required. She couldn't explain why, but she felt a connection to this family, a pull to be part of their journey. Perhaps it was because she had been there in the darkest moments, or perhaps it was because she had seen something that would stay with her forever, a reminder that even in the face of loss, hope could find a way. As the days turned into weeks, the hospital was abuzz with murmurs about the miraculous twin. Nurses exchanged knowing glances, doctors debated theories in hushed tones, and even the most seasoned staff couldn't help but stop by room 212 to catch a glimpse of the baby everyone was calling a miracle. But for Sarah, the awe and curiosity surrounding her daughters were a double-edged sword. She was grateful that her baby was alive, but the constant attention left her feeling vulnerable, as though the world was waiting for something to go wrong. Claire noticed the strain on Sarah almost immediately. She had grown protective of the young mother, often acting as a buffer between her and the curious onlookers. Claire knew that the hospital was a place of healing, but it was also a place where clinical detachment often overshadowed humanity. Sarah didn't need to be a case study. She needed to be a mother, free to love her children without the weight of everyone's expectations. One evening, Claire found Sarah sitting in the dimly lit room, both babies cradled in her arms. The twins were nestled together, their tiny hands intertwined, as if they had never been apart. Sarah's eyes were fixed on them, a mixture of wonder and worry etched into her face. "They're so peaceful," Sarah said softly, not looking up. "But I can't stop thinking. What if it happens again? What if I lose her for good this time?" Claire pulled up a chair, her heart aching for the young mother. "Sarah," she began gently, "you've been through something no one should ever have to face. But look at her now. She's strong. She's fighting. And you're not alone in this. We're all here to make sure she gets the care she needs." Sarah nodded, but her grip on the babies tightened. It doesn't make sense, Claire. She was gone. I felt it. And now she's here like nothing happened. How am I supposed to trust that she's really okay?" Claire hesitated. She didn't have the answers Sarah needed, but she knew the uncertainty was eating away at her. "Sometimes things happen that we can't explain," she said carefully. "Science doesn't always have all the answers. But what I do know is that your love, your connection with your daughters, is something special. Maybe that's what brought her back." Sarah looked at Claire, her eyes brimming with tears. "Do you really believe that?" Claire smiled softly. "I do." But even as she said the words, Claire couldn't shake the nagging questions in her own mind. What had really happened that night? Was it a medical anomaly, a fluke of biology that had somehow given the baby a second chance? Or was there something more at play, something that defied the boundaries of science and logic? As the weeks passed, the twins continued to grow stronger. The once lifeless twin, whom Sarah had named Hope, seemed to thrive in ways that astonished even the most optimistic doctors. Her vitals stabilized, her appetite grew, and her cries became as robust as her sister's. Yet, for all the progress, there were moments that left Claire uneasy. One night, while doing her rounds, Claire noticed something strange. The healthy twin Grace had been sleeping soundly in her crib, but Hope was wide awake, her tiny eyes fixed on the ceiling. Claire leaned in, her brow furrowing as she noticed the baby's lips moving, as though she were trying to form words. It was impossible, of course. She was far too young. But the intensity in her gaze sent a shiver down Claire's spine. "Hope," Claire whispered, feeling slightly foolish for addressing the infant. But the baby's eyes shifted to her, and for a fleeting moment, Claire felt as though she were being seen, truly seen, in a way that defied explanation. The moment passed quickly, and Claire shook her head, chalking it up to exhaustion. But the feeling lingered, a small seed of doubt that grew with each passing day. She began to notice other oddities. How Hope would calm instantly when Grace was near, how her cries seemed to mirror her sister's emotions, how she seemed hyper-aware of her surroundings in a way that was unusual for a newborn. Meanwhile, Sarah was grappling with her own fears. She had started having vivid dreams, dreams where Hope was calling out to her, not with cries but with words. In these dreams, Sarah would see the moment of her daughter's death replayed, only for Hope to reach out and say, "I wasn't ready to leave." Sarah tried to dismiss them as the product of her grief and exhaustion, but the dreams left her shaken. The tension came to a head one afternoon when Sarah overheard two doctors discussing her case in the hallway. They didn't realize she was within earshot, but their words cut through her like a knife. "I've never seen anything like it," one doctor said. "If it weren't for the test results, I'd say the baby was never dead to begin with." But those readings were conclusive. There was no activity, nothing. It's almost like she was brought back. Brought back by what? The other doctor replied, his tone skeptical. "This isn't some fairy tale. There has to be a logical explanation." "Maybe," the first doctor said. But logic doesn't always cover everything. The conversation left Sarah reeling. She confronted Claire later that evening, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and desperation. "What aren't they telling me? What's wrong with my baby?" Claire placed a steadying hand on Sarah's arm. "There's nothing wrong with Hope," she said firmly. "She's healthy. She's thriving. But this is uncharted territory for all of us. No one's trying to hide anything from you. We're just trying to understand it ourselves." Sarah's expression softened, but the worry in her eyes remained. "I just want to protect them," she said quietly. "I just want them to be safe." "And you're doing that," Claire assured her. "You're an amazing mother, Sarah. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." But even as she spoke the words, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that they were all standing on the edge of something much larger than they understood, something that had yet to reveal itself.